No one in the 8th Air Force ever forgot January 21st, 1945. Not because it was the coldest day of that winter, though it was, and not because the sky over Germany looked like a steel trap waiting to snap shut, though it did. They remembered it because of something that should never have happened. Something no man could survive, but somehow one did. The crew of B-17G Barrelhouse Bell launched that morning from RAF Bassingbourn, with engines droning and breath freezing inside their masks. Lieutenant Clark Hensley, the pilot, felt the familiar ache of tension along his spine as the bomber lifted into the pale dawn. He had flown 21 missions, and each one carved a little more from his soul. He reminded himself to breathe slowly, to keep his hands light on the yoke, to trust the men behind him. Down below in the belly turret, Technical Sergeant Noah Franklin, the ball turret gunner, curled himself into the glass sphere like a child, folding into a cradle that was also a coffin. He was 20 years old, soft-spoken, with a Kansas accent so gentle it seemed out of place among the steel and violence. He was the smallest man in the crew, and the bravest in ways no one ever said aloud. You had to be, to sit inside that fragile bubble hanging beneath a 4-engine bomber, alone with the sky and death. The target was a rail junction south of Frankfurt. Intelligence said German armor was massing there, too much to ignore. So the Bell joined hundreds of other silver fortresses, engines groaning as they climbed higher and deeper into enemy airspace, into a place where the sky belonged to no one and everyone at once. By the time they reached the Rhine, flak was already climbing to greet them. "Here she comes," muttered Morgan, the top turret gunner. His voice crackled over the interphone. Black puffs dead ahead. Clark steadied the plane. "Hold tight. They're aiming for altitude." But the flak gunners weren't guessing today. They were waiting. The first burst rocked the Bell so violently that Clark's helmet slammed against the metal frame. A second shell detonated beneath the left wing root, rattling the entire aircraft. Down in the ball turret, Noah's world became a storm of fire and shrapnel. He shouted something. What exactly? No one understood, but his voice was swallowed by static. Then the big one hit. A flak shell exploded so close to the ball turret that almost every man aboard felt the shock like a fist against his spine. The turret spun half a rotation, metal screeching, and Noah's headset went dead. Clark yelled, "Ball turret! Noah, do you read?" "Silence." Eddie, the radio operator, scrambled from his station and peered down the narrow catwalk toward the turret well. "Pilot, the turret's not responding. Hydraulics might be gone." Clark's breath chilled. If the turret jammed, Noah would be trapped. If the landing gear failed later, he didn't want to think about what that would mean. "We'll handle it after the drop," he ordered. "Hold steady. No one panic. Noah, hang on down there," the Bell pushed on. They released their bombs on target, the aircraft jerking upward as the weight left her. But the relief lasted only a heartbeat. German fighters, Bf-109s and FW-190s, rose from the clouds like wolves. "Bandits! Bandits!" shouted Morgan. 6 o'clock low. Noah's guns should have opened fire. They didn't. The fighters swept in, raking the bomber with cannon fire. Bullets punched through the right wing, slicing through metal and fabric. One round tore the oxygen line in the radio room. Another blew out part of the waist window. Inside the belly turret, Noah saw nothing. No sky, no Germans. Just a sudden shudder and the terrifying realization that his controls were dead. The turret was unpowered, stuck facing the wrong direction, glass cracked in 3 places. He felt blood running down his cheek but didn't know from where. He tried the interphone again. Silence. Above him, the Bell lurched, a sickening downward dip. Noah felt himself falling with it. For a moment he thought the whole aircraft was spinning. Then, with a metallic shriek that vibrated through his bones, the turret's bottom hatch seal blew open. Air roared in like a living monster, and suddenly Noah wasn't in the turret anymore. He was falling. He didn't even have time to scream. The sphere had cracked open beneath him, and he tumbled through the jagged hole into the freezing world below, the bomber shrinking above him as if pulled away by some cruel hand. No parachute, no hope. Just sky. The others didn't see the fall. They only felt the blast that tore the turret loose. Eddie screamed over the interphone, "Pilot! We lost the turret. The whole damn it, Noah fell." He fell out. Clark froze. He couldn't process it. Repeat that, radio, repeat. He fell without a chute. Oh God, Noah. He's gone. Clark stared through the windshield at the barren blue sky. 20 seconds ago, he'd been thinking about engine temperature, formation spacing, fighters. Now all he could see was the shape of his young gunner plummeting into Germany. But Noah wasn't dead. Not yet. The air crushed him, spinning him end over end. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He only knew one thing, that he was not ready to die. He fought to stabilize his body, spreading his arms and legs, trying to face downward. His belly slammed against the wind so hard he thought his ribs cracked. Below him, snow-covered fields rushed up like an endless white sheet. He prayed, not for life but for mercy. When he hit, the world disappeared. Snow exploded around him in a storm of ice and silence. And then, darkness. They thought he was dead. They were wrong. A German farmer discovered him half buried in a drift, not broken into pieces, but alive. Alive in a way no human should be after falling 4 miles. His right leg was snapped, ribs cracked, a shoulder dislocated. But his heart still beat. The farmer didn't call soldiers. Instead, he dug Noah out, wrapped him in blankets, and dragged him to a barn where he stoked a fire and prayed in German over the boy's unconscious body. Hours later, Wehrmacht medics arrived after hearing reports of an airman falling from heaven. They carried Noah to a field hospital, where a stunned German doctor declared, "This is impossible, but he is alive." Word spread through the camp faster than truth usually travels in war. The man who fell from a flying fortress without a parachute and lived. Back in England, the crew of Barrelhouse Bell landed with broken hearts. Clark gathered his men on the runway and took off his cap. No one spoke. Noah Franklin had been the youngest of them, the one who laughed easiest, who shared chocolate bars without being asked, who wrote letters home every night because he said the silence scared him. When they filed their missing crewman report, every man cried. They buried him in their minds, carried his death like a wound that wouldn't close. 3 months later, when the war in Europe ended, Clark was packing his duffel bag when a chaplain knocked on his door. "Lieutenant Hensley, you may want to sit down," Clark frowned. "Did something happen stateside? My family?" "No," the chaplain said gently. "This is something else, something you won't believe." He handed Clark a telegram. Clark read it once, then again. His vision blurred. His knees nearly gave out. Sergeant Noah Franklin, alive interned, now liberated by Allied forces, medically stable, requests contact with his crew. When Clark arrived at the hospital, he found Noah in a bed near a window, leg in a cast, bandages along his ribs, eyes bright as the Kansas sky he once described. When he saw his pilot, he smiled a weary, crooked smile. "Took you long enough," Noah whispered. Clark grabbed his shoulder with a trembling hand. "You fell 4 miles. You fell without a chute, Noah." "Yeah," Noah said, shrugging carefully, "but I landed in snow. Guess God wasn't done with me yet." The crew surrounded him, laughing and crying. Noah leaned back, closing his eyes, letting their voices surround him. He had fallen through hell and landed in a cold miracle. And now he was home, not because war had spared him, but because fate had, for reasons no one would ever understand. That night, Clark sat beside Noah's bed and whispered, "What do you want to do when you get home?" "Live," Noah answered simply. "Just live." And he did. For decades, he became a quiet legend in the U.S. Air Force, the gunner who fell from the sky and survived. The man no one believed at first, until they heard the doctor's testimony, the farmer's story, the undeniable truth. He was the miracle no bomber crew ever forgot, the living proof that sometimes, even in the darkest sky of the deadliest war, the impossible still happens.